The candlelight flickers against frosted windows where snow howls in sheets, pounding the glass like it wants inside. 90 people sit frozen at their tables in the upscale Italian restaurant, forks suspended halfway to their mouths, because something is happening that does not happen in places like this. A waitress stumbles backward. Her tray crashes against marble floors with a sound like breaking bones. The plates scatter. The wine glasses shatter. And then a man's hand cracks across her face so hard that the sound travels through every corner of the restaurant, silencing even the kitchen. Douglas Hale grabs Sofia Reynolds by the hair. Her white server's uniform tears at the shoulder as he slams her against the wall near the kitchen entrance, her head striking plaster with a wet thud. Her apron pocket rips open. $78 in crumpled bills and coins scatter across the floor like leaves. Every tip. Every dollar she counted by lamplight at 3 a.m, sitting on her bed in a studio apartment that smells like mildew and broken promises, trying to figure out how to stretch it across another week. She tries to shield her face with trembling hands. Her lip splits. Blood fills her mouth, hot and metallic. At the back of the restaurant, in the private booth where he always sits, Nicholas Calabrese stops breathing. He is tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that touches his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar runs from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a fight he won when he was 19 years old. His suit costs more than this waitress earns in 6 months. His watch costs more than her car. Everything about him screams power and danger and absolute control. Bruno sits to his left, Franco to his right. Both men have reached for their weapons. Both men wait for the signal that never comes. Nicholas does not move. He does not blink. His jaw tightens. His breathing becomes shallow and controlled, the way it becomes when something inside him is waking up. The entire restaurant understands what is happening. The waiters press themselves against the walls. The diners stare at their plates with the intensity of people trying to become invisible. Because everyone in Los Angeles knows who Nicholas Calabrese is. Everyone knows what he does. And everyone knows that when he is watching, you do not move. Douglas Hale does not know. Or he does not care. You took everything from me, he hisses at Sofia, shaking her by the hair. Everything. And now you are going to pay. His fist comes up. His knuckles aim for her ribs. Sofia does something that no one in the restaurant expects. She stops cowering. She stops protecting her face. Instead, she looks Douglas Hale directly in the eyes, and in those eyes he sees something he has never seen before in her. Defiance. Exhaustion so deep it has turned into iron. She spits blood at his feet. You took everything from me, she says, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind but each word carved in stone. But you will not take my dignity. The restaurant goes completely silent. Even the sound of the blizzard outside seems to pause. Nicholas Calabrese sees her in that moment the way a person sees a flash of lightning that changes the shape of the world. He sees a woman with dark hair matted with blood, wearing a torn uniform that has a name tag reading Sofia pinned to the chest. He sees a woman who weighs maybe 110 pounds standing alone against a man twice her size. He sees her chin lifting. He sees her refusing to break. And he sees himself at 7 years old. He remembers that night. He remembers the basement apartment in a neighborhood where the walls sweat and the floors reek of stale beer. He remembers his father coming home at 2 a.m, smelling like whiskey and rage, and Nicholas was awake because he had learned long ago that sleep was not safe. His mother was already bruised. Already bleeding. Already so broken that she could not stand. His father's fists came down like hammers. And Nicholas, at 7 years old, backed into the corner, learned something fundamental about survival. He learned that you become harder than the world, or the world crushes you flat. Douglas Hale raises his fist again. Bruno and Franco move to stand, but Nicholas lifts his palm. Just barely. Just enough. They freeze. Douglas Hale's fist comes down toward Sofia's face. And in the moment before impact, Nicholas Calabrese moves in a way that only a man who has spent 20 years perfecting violence can move. He crosses the restaurant in 4 strides. He catches Douglas Hale's wrist mid-swing with one hand, and the force of it stops the other man cold. The bones in Douglas Hale's arm scream with pressure. "Step away from her," Nicholas says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath. It fills every corner of the restaurant. It fills Sofia's chest and the chests of everyone watching. Douglas Hale tries to jerk his arm free. He cannot. He is a large man, muscular from the gym, but he is not trained. He is not accustomed to fighting people who will not stop. "Let me go," Douglas says. His voice is already shaking. "You don't know who you're messing with." "I know exactly who I am messing with," Nicholas says quietly. "A man who has spent the last year draining the savings account of a single mother. A man who beat a woman in front of 90 witnesses. A man who is about to learn what consequences look like." He releases Douglas Hale's wrist and steps back. The other man stumbles forward, and Bruno appears at his shoulder like smoke. Franco appears at his other shoulder. They do not touch him. They do not need to. "Get him out," Nicholas says. They move him toward the door, not roughly, but with the absolute certainty of men who are following orders. Douglas Hale's protests die in his throat when he feels the weight of their presence, the promise that resistance will only make things worse. The door closes behind him. The sound of wind and snow rushes in for 1 second, then fades. Sofia stands against the wall, breathing hard, her hand pressed to her lip where blood is still seeping. Nicholas turns to face her. He is still in his dinner jacket, still composed, still radiating the kind of power that makes people instinctively lower their gaze. But as he steps toward her, something shifts in his expression. The hardness softens, just barely. Just enough to let something else show through. "Can you stand?" he asks. She nods, but when she tries to push off from the wall, her legs will not hold her. They give out like water. Nicholas catches her before she falls, his arm around her waist, supporting her weight with the care a man might use to hold a child. Sofia looks up at his face and sees the scar that runs down his cheekbone. She sees the eyes that have seen things she cannot imagine. She sees a man who looks like he was built for violence, and who is holding her like she is made of glass. "Why?" she whispers. Nicholas does not answer for a long moment. He is looking at her mouth, at the blood, at the bruise already blooming along her jaw. He is seeing something in her that his own men will never see again, because this is the moment before he becomes a different man. "Because you had the courage to spit blood at a man trying to destroy you," he says finally. "And because no one should have to face that alone." He guides her toward a chair. One of the restaurant staff brings water, brings ice wrapped in cloth, brings things that might help. Sofia sits and holds the ice to her lip, tasting copper and cold. At the other tables, people return slowly to their meals. The piano player starts playing again, soft jazz that fills the space where violence just was. But everyone is still watching from the corners of their eyes, because in Los Angeles, a story has just begun that will spread like fire through the city. Bruno and Franco return to the booth. Franco leans close to Bruno and whispers something. Bruno nods slowly, his expression unreadable. "In 15 years, Bruno says quietly, I have never seen him do that." Franco says nothing. He just watches Nicholas Calabrese sit across from a waitress with a torn uniform, making sure her hands stop shaking. The blizzard continues outside, snow piling against the windows, the storm raging with the fury of a living thing. Inside the restaurant, under warm light, a different kind of storm is beginning. What Sofia does not understand is that her life just changed in a way she cannot yet measure. What she does not know is that the man sitting across from her has spent 15 years ensuring no one in his city feels as helpless as he once did. What she does not realize is that her defiance in front of 90 witnesses, spitting blood at a man twice her size, just awakened something in him that will reshape everything. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to the night that led Sofia Reynolds to this restaurant, to the moment she counted $78 by lamplight and realized it would not be enough. It was 3 hours earlier. It was the kind of night when the rain falls sideways and the wind tries to push you off the sidewalk. It was the kind of night when everything feels impossible. 3 weeks before the blizzard that would change everything, Sofia Reynolds sat at a kitchen table the size of a card table in a studio apartment on the corner of Maple and Fifth, counting $78 in crumpled bills under the weak yellow light of a single lamp. The $78 represented 3 weeks of tips, after taxes had been pulled from her paycheck, after she paid the electric bill that arrived with a red stamp that said final notice. The bills were worn soft from handling, and some of them had coffee stains from the diner on them, which meant she had carried them in her apron pocket while serving people with warm homes and warm coats. In the next room, Emma was sleeping. Emma was 6 years old and had learned not to ask questions anymore when her mother's face went quiet. Beside Emma on a shared twin bed was her brother Marcus, age 8, who had stopped crying at night sometime in the last 6 months. Sofia could hear them breathing through the paper-thin wall, a sound like wind through broken places. On the table in front of her sat an envelope sealed with the bank's official letterhead. Inside was a notice printed in bold red letters that said foreclosure notice, and beneath that, in numbers that felt like a physical weight, $22,000. Payment due in 14 days or the bank would take the apartment. The apartment was 300 square feet. It smelled like mildew and the ghosts of broken promises, but it was where her children slept, and that made it everything. Sofia picked up her pencil and did the math again, though she had already done it 47 times. $312 per week, working double shifts at the diner 6 days a week. 2 weeks of that income was $624. To reach $22,000, she would need to work for 72 weeks without spending a single cent on food, electricity, water, or the medications Emma took for her asthma. 72 weeks. That was nearly 2 years. She had 14 days. She set the pencil down and pressed her hands flat against the table. Her palms were raw. The skin had cracked in several places from washing dishes in water that was always either too hot or too cold, and the cracks had scabbed over and cracked again, and now her hands looked like the hands of a woman twice her age. Sofia was 27 years old. She looked like she was 40. 6 months ago, Douglas Hale had been sitting at this same table. Douglas had been beautiful in the way that dangerous men sometimes are, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and a smile that made you believe in futures that did not exist. He had held her hand and told her they were building something together, a life, a foundation. He had convinced her to add his name to her savings account because that was what couples did, he said. That was what people who were building futures together did. She had checked the balance one morning while he was in the shower. The number had been $42,017. Her entire inheritance from her mother. The money that was supposed to carry her and Emma and Marcus through every emergency, every uncertainty, every night when the world felt too heavy to carry alone. By evening, the balance said 0. Douglas had left a note on the kitchen counter that said he was sorry, that he had gotten involved with people who required repayment, that he was doing her a favor by leaving because if he stayed they would hurt her to find him. He had not left a forwarding address. 3 months later, a man in a suit showed up at the diner asking if she knew where he was, and she said no, and the man had placed a business card on the counter and told her that when she found him, she should call this number because there were people very interested in having a conversation with Mr. Hale about what he had done with their money. The other debt collectors called during her break shifts. A man's voice, flat and mechanical, listing numbers as if he were reading a grocery list. $125,000 total. The foreclosure. The medical bills from Emma's pneumonia 2 years ago when Sofia had taken her to the emergency room at 3 in the morning because the child had stopped breathing properly. Credit card fraud that Douglas had committed in her name before he disappeared. The debt collectors told her that if she could not pay within 2 weeks, they would garnish her wages and pursue criminal charges against her as an accessory to fraud, and then her children would go into state custody because she would be incarcerated. During that phone call, Sofia had walked to the employee bathroom and vomited until nothing remained inside her except fear and a clarity that felt like glass breaking. That night, she tucked Emma and Marcus into bed and pulled the thin blanket up to their chins. Emma's hair still smelled like the cheap shampoo from the dollar store, and Marcus had fallen asleep immediately, as children do when they have learned not to waste energy on anything except sleep. Emma had not fallen asleep yet. She had looked up at her mother with eyes that held too much awareness and asked in a voice barely above a whisper, "Mama, why do you cry when you think I'm sleeping?" Sofia had lied. She had said she was just tired, and she had smoothed Emma's hair back from her forehead, and she had tried to smile in a way that would not transfer all of her fear into her child's bones. But Emma had known. Children always know when the adults around them are drowning. After they slept, Sofia had pulled out the small cloth bundle from beneath the mattress where she kept it, wrapped in an old t-shirt to protect it. Inside were a pair of tiny shoes. Emma's first shoes, from the shelter. 2 years ago, before Sofia had gotten the job at the diner, before they had moved into this apartment, they had lived in a shelter for 6 months. Those shoes had cost $4 at a second-hand shop, and they had been the most precious thing Sofia owned because they represented the day Emma took her first steps, and that day had happened in a shelter room that smelled like industrial cleaner and other people's trauma. She held the shoes now, feeling the soft worn leather, and she whispered to herself in the dark, "We survived worse. We will survive this." The words felt like a prayer and a lie and the only truth she had left. 3 miles away, the temperature was dropping. The weather service had issued warnings about a blizzard approaching from the north. Winds up to 40 miles per hour. Visibility near zero. The storm would arrive in 48 hours. They told people to prepare, to stay home if possible, to not drive unless absolutely necessary. The next morning, Sofia's car made a sound like a dying animal when she tried to start it. A grinding noise from under the hood, a mechanical scream, and then nothing. The repair shop owner, a man named Sal who had kind eyes, had looked at the engine for 5 minutes and then quoted her $800 to fix the transmission. $800. She had made $312 last week. She told him she would call him back and walked out of the shop and began walking toward the diner instead. 3 miles. In clothing that was falling apart, wearing shoes held together with duct tape, with a broken zipper on her jacket that she had wrapped with string to keep it from opening completely. The rain fell sideways, and the wind tried to push her backward. By the time she reached the diner, her legs were shaking and her fingers had lost all feeling. The diner was called Murphy's. It had been a family establishment for 37 years, and the current owner, a man named Frank, had hired Sofia when she had walked in with an application that did not ask for references he would call. He had looked at her for 10 seconds and said, "You start tomorrow. Shift starts at 5 a.m. He had not asked her name that day. She had told him it was Sofia. He had nodded as if he already knew. Her shift that day lasted 11 hours. Her manager, a woman named Donna who had been working at Murphy's for 22 years and had become bitter in the exact way that people become bitter when hope is slowly removed from them, barked orders about Section 5 being 15 minutes behind and why was Table 8 still waiting for their coffee. Sofia moved between tables, pouring coffee into white ceramic mugs, clearing plates, wiping spills. Most of the customers did not make eye contact with her. Most of them left $2 tips on $20 bills. By hour 6, her feet were bleeding through her socks. She could feel the blood pooling in her shoes, and every step felt like walking on broken glass. By hour 11, she was no longer aware of her body. She had moved past pain into a kind of numb mechanical functioning where her hands knew what to do and her mind was somewhere else, somewhere far away where Emma and Marcus were not asleep in an apartment that was about to be taken from them. During her break, she sat in the bathroom and tried not to fall asleep because if she fell asleep she might not wake up, and the diner needed her, and her children needed her more. She pressed her hands against her eyes and breathed in the smell of industrial cleaner, and she thought about nothing because thinking had become too expensive. When she clocked out at 6:30 in the evening, the sky was already darkening. The blizzard was still 36 hours away, but it was already beginning to move in her direction, and the air felt different, heavier, like the world was holding its breath before it screamed. She walked home in the rain and the cold, and by the time she reached the apartment building, she realized that something had shifted. The wind that had been pushing her was now pulling her toward something she could not yet see, toward a moment that existed in the future and was reaching backward through time to find her. She did not know that in 48 hours, she would be stranded on a highway. She did not know that a convoy of black SUVs would emerge from the blizzard like something summoned from the darkness. She did not know that a man named Nicholas Calabrese existed, or that his eyes held the kind of pain that only comes from surviving things that should have destroyed you. She did not know that her life was about to change in a way she could not measure. She only knew that she had $78.14, and the rain felt like it was washing something away, and somewhere in the darkness, a door was opening. The blizzard had not yet arrived, but the wind was already moving like something alive, pushing against the windows of Sofia Reynolds' apartment at 2 in the morning. She lay awake in the dark, listening to the radiator's death rattle, her body pressed close to Emma's small frame, feeling the steady rise and fall of her daughter's breathing. Marcus slept in the next room on a mattress that had belonged to 3 families before them. The foreclosure notice sat on the kitchen table like a predator that had learned to wait. 7 days. $125,000. An impossible number. Sofia rose without waking Emma and moved to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain, and somewhere beyond them, the storm was gathering its strength. She pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders, even though the cold she felt had nothing to do with the weather. Her phone buzzed. A text from her diner manager. Blizzard coming in 2 days. Work the graveyard shift tomorrow night. We are short-staffed. She could not say no. She had never been able to say no. By 9 o'clock the next evening, Sofia sat in her neighbor's borrowed sedan, a 2003 Corolla with one functioning windshield wiper and a heater that had given up somewhere around the Obama administration. The car coughed as she merged onto the interstate heading toward the diner across the city. The radio crackled with storm warnings. Visibility dropping. Roads becoming treacherous. All non-essential travelers should remain home. Sofia gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept driving. The snow came faster than the meteorologists predicted. Flakes the size of thumbs swallowed the highway. Her headlights caught only white, endless and absolute. The wipers beat against the windshield like a dying heartbeat. Thump. 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 She leaned forward, straining to see the road that was disappearing beneath her. The car sputtered. She tapped the dashboard gently, the way you might tap a sick animal to check if it was still breathing. Then it died. Sofia coasted to the shoulder and sat in the sudden silence. The engine ticked as it cooled. The snow piled against the windows, and the world beyond became a solid wall of white. She turned the key. Nothing. Again. The engine cranked, grunted, gave up. She turned off the headlights to preserve the battery and sat in darkness so complete it felt like drowning in reverse. Her phone showed 4% battery. No signal. She pulled her thin coat tighter and calculated, the diner was 8 miles away. The temperature outside was dropping below freezing. Her breath fogged the windshield. She had $43 in her pocket, and she had just cost herself a full shift's wages by getting stranded on a highway in a blizzard. She thought about Emma waking up tomorrow morning. Marcus asking when Mommy was coming home. The foreclosure deadline now 6 days away instead of 7. The way the landlord had looked at her last week, like she was a piece of furniture he was preparing to discard. Sofia rested her head against the steering wheel and did not cry because her tears had become too expensive to waste. Headlights cut through the storm like a blade through darkness. Not one car. 5 black SUVs, moving in formation with precision that seemed impossible in conditions like these. They slowed as they approached. The lead vehicle pulled up behind her, and a driver emerged wearing a charcoal suit and an expression that suggested he had seen many things worse than a woman freezing on the side of a highway. Engine failure. His voice was polite. Curious. Not the voice of someone accustomed to being told no. Sofia cracked the window open. Wind and snow rushed in. I work at Moretti's Diner on 5th and Ashland. I can pay for a tow truck. The driver exchanged a glance with the man in the passenger seat of the lead SUV. A moment of silent communication passed between them. The driver turned back to Sofia. Mr. Calabrese will take you. She did not know the name Nicholas Calabrese. She had lived in Los Angeles for 4 years, working double shifts and rationing every penny, existing in the service industry's invisible world where powerful men were rumors told in kitchen whispers. But she recognized the way this man said it, like stating a fact about the weather or gravity. The back door of the lead SUV opened from inside. Sofia sat in the passenger cabin of a vehicle that smelled like leather and expensive cologne. The heater worked perfectly. The seats were warm. She had become so accustomed to cold that the warmth felt like a kind of violence against her nervous system. She sat rigid, hands folded, watching the snow disappear beneath the precision drive wheels. The man in the back seat was reading papers with a pen in his hand, moving through documents with the focus of someone handling matters of weight. He was tall, with dark hair silvering at the temples, wearing an open-necked white shirt beneath a charcoal suit that had been tailored in a way that suggested someone had measured every angle of his body. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, the kind of scar that came from violence. When he glanced up, his eyes were the color of storm clouds, penetrating and old. He studied her for one measured second, then returned to his papers. "Your engine is broken," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered in a voice like venom poured into velvet. "Yes, sir." "You were driving to work." "Yes, sir. I waitress at Moretti's on 5th and Ashland. The roads are sealed. The highway department issued a travel warning 30 minutes ago." He set down his papers and leaned back. "You would have frozen." Sofia said nothing. This was true. The mathematics of her death had been calculated and found to be plausible. The driver, a man with a neck like a tree trunk and kind eyes, spoke from the front. "Boss, the safe house on Mulholland is secure. We should head there. Roads back toward the city are becoming impassable." The man Nicholas did not even look at him. "We go to the diner." "But sir, the visibility." "We go to the diner." The tone was not angry. It was the tone of a man accustomed to being obeyed. The driver, evidently named Bruno, closed his mouth. The passenger seat occupant, a leaner man with the restless energy of a coiled spring, glanced over his shoulder at his boss. "The woman's not worth the risk, Calabrese. Leave her, call her a tow truck, move on." Nicholas did not acknowledge this. He returned to his papers. After a long moment, he spoke to Sofia without looking up. "What is your name?" "Sofia Reynolds." "Sofia." "I am Nicholas. The driver is Bruno. The man who thinks I should have left you to freeze is Franco. We will take you to work." He turned another page. "What time does your shift begin?" 11 o'clock. "We will arrive at 10:45. The rest of the drive passed in silence, broken only by the rhythm of wipers beating against wind and the radio reporting road closures and rescue operations. Sofia sat in the warmth, watching the snow pile against the windows, her mind fracturing between relief and fear and the strange gratitude that comes from thinking you are going to die and then you do not. When the diner's neon sign emerged from the whiteness, she felt the full weight of what had just happened. This man, this Nicholas Calabrese, had altered his plans. Diverted his convoy. Risked his time and his men for a stranger he had driven once before in a moment Sofia had convinced herself was a dream. The SUV pulled to the curb. Bruno brought the vehicle to a stop with the gentleness of someone handling something fragile. Sofia unbuckled her seatbelt. "Thank you. I do not know how to repay you." Nicholas set down his papers and looked at her fully. His eyes held the kind of exhaustion that comes from surviving things that should have destroyed you. "You do not owe me anything. But what you do owe your daughters is everything. Make sure you give it to them." How he knew she had daughters, she could not have explained. But she said nothing. She nodded and stepped out into the snow. The diner's fluorescent lights burned like something holy, and Sofia walked toward them without looking back. Behind her, in the SUV, Franco leaned over the seat. "Boss, in 15 years I have never seen you adjust a single plan for anyone outside this organization." "Why her?" Nicholas watched Sofia disappear into the diner. His jaw tightened. "Because I watched my father beat my mother while a room full of people did nothing. I was 7 years old. I swore if I ever had power, I would never let that helplessness stand again." Bruno's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. Neither man spoke. But both understood that something had shifted in their world, though neither could have articulated what. The SUV pulled away from the curb and dissolved into the white. The morning light broke through the office windows like a blade wrapped in ice. Sofia sat in a chair that cost more than 3 months of her old rent, her hands trembling so badly that the check, the actual check for $22,000, kept slipping between her fingers. $22,000. The exact number on the foreclosure notice that had haunted her for 117 days. She had counted them. Every single one. Nicholas Calabrese stood behind his desk, the same man who had diverted a convoy through a blizzard for a stranger. Bruno and Franco flanked the walls like statues carved from stone, their expressions unreadable. The office smelled like mahogany and old money and something else, something like power that had learned to be quiet. "Rachel Dawson runs a trafficking operation," Nicholas said. His voice moved like thunder across still water. "She identifies desperate women. Single mothers. Women with sick children. Women with nothing left to lose. She offers them jobs. Good jobs. Jobs that sound impossible for someone in your position." Sofia's mouth went dry. She thought of Rachel's smile across the diner counter. The way Rachel had leaned in close and whispered, "I think you would be perfect for this." "She gives them advance payments," Nicholas continued. $5,000. $10,000. Enough to make the debt real, make it personal. Then she creates situations where they cannot leave. Situations where they owe her more than they can ever repay. She has done this to 17 women we know about. You were going to be the 18th. The room tilted. Sofia gripped the armrest. She remembered Rachel's suggestion, so casual, so kind, that Emma could come along to the interview. Emma. Her 5-year-old daughter. She remembered thinking how perfect it would be, how Emma could finally have new shoes, how they could eat something other than pasta 3 nights in a row. "Why are you telling me this?" Sofia's voice came out fractured, like glass breaking underwater. Nicholas moved from behind the desk. He was tall, 6'2", maybe taller, and he moved like something that had learned violence and chosen something else instead. He sat in the chair across from her, and the proximity was suddenly intimate in a way that made her throat close. "I grew up in poverty," he said. His eyes held the kind of exhaustion that comes from surviving things that should have destroyed you. "My father beat my mother in a 1-room apartment in East Los Angeles while neighbors heard everything and did nothing. I was 7 years old. My mother was 24. There was a man who lived across the hall. He was a contractor, successful, powerful. He heard my mother screaming. He did nothing." Bruno shifted slightly. Franco's jaw tightened. "I swore," Nicholas said, "that if I ever had power, I would never let that helplessness stand again. I would never let someone who could help choose not to. You have 2 daughters depending on you. That makes you worth protecting." Sofia felt something break inside her chest. The weight of the last 8 months, the debt collectors calling at 3 in the morning, the rationing of every dollar, the nights when she had counted the pills in the medicine cabinet and thought how easy it would be to make it all stop, the weight of all of it came crashing down at once. Her shoulders shook. Her hands covered her face. Bruno, with the awkwardness of a man who had never comforted anyone, set a box of tissues on the armrest. Franco looked away, studying the painting on the wall as if it held answers to questions he had never asked. Sofia cried. She cried for the $217 she had earned in tips last month. She cried for the shoes she had held since the shelter, Emma's first pair, so small they fit in the palm of her hand. She cried for the moment Rachel Dawson had smiled at her and Sofia had felt, for the first time in months, that someone believed in her. "I cannot accept this," she finally whispered. "You have to," Nicholas said. His voice was quiet. "Because if you do not, then the people who did this to you win. They win because they made you believe you were nobody worth saving. You have to accept this so your daughters learn that there are people in this world who will move heaven and earth for them." Sofia looked up at him. His eyes were steady, patient, and infinitely sad. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The moment stretched between them. Then Nicholas's phone rang. The sound cut through the office like a blade through silk. Bruno answered, listened, and his entire body went rigid. "Put him on speaker," Nicholas said. A voice crackled through the phone, one of Nicholas's informants, breathless with urgency. "Boss, Douglas Hale is at Rachel Dawson's estate. He's been there all morning. They're celebrating. He told one of the security guards that he knows where Sofia Reynolds lives and he plans to teach her a lesson for getting him thrown out of that restaurant. He said," the informant paused. "He said he knows where her kids go to school." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Sofia made a sound like something breaking. Bruno moved toward her instantly, his massive frame a shield between her and the door. Nicholas stood. When he moved, every muscle in his body was precision itself, like a machine that had been oiled and calibrated for exactly this moment. "We move tonight," he said. "Franco, I want surveillance on Dawson's estate. Full perimeter. Bruno, get a team ready for entry. And Sofia," he looked at her directly. "You are going to go home. You are going to hug your daughters. You are going to make sure they know that their mother is the strongest person they will ever meet." Sofia walked home in the afternoon light, the check folded against her chest like a prayer. The apartment was small and cold and smelled like mildew and broken promises, exactly as it had for 8 months. She picked Emma up from the neighbor's apartment and held her daughter for a long time without speaking. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sofia stood on the tiny balcony for stories above the street. The railing was cold under her palms. The city hummed below her, traffic, sirens, the sound of millions of people living their lives. The wind carried the smell of exhaust and winter and something else, something like change. Her hand shook on the railing. The exhaustion pulled at her like gravity. It would be so easy to stop fighting. So easy to just let the weight win. She looked down at the street below and thought about how simple it would be to make it all stop. "Mama." Emma's small voice came from inside the apartment. "Mama, can you read me a story?" Sofia stepped inside and closed the door. She picked her daughter up and held her tight, feeling the small heartbeat against her chest. "Mama is here," she whispered. "Mama will always be here." At 10 o'clock that night, 12 men in black tactical gear moved through Rachel Dawson's estate like ghosts through walls. No alarm sounded. No guard shouted. The security system had been disabled by a man who now worked for Nicholas Calabrese, a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Franco led the entry team. Bruno coordinated from the vehicle outside. And Nicholas walked through the front door as if he owned the place, because in that moment, he did. They found Rachel in her study with Douglas Hale. The safe was open. Cash was spread across the desk in neat stacks. Rachel was counting while Douglas watched, his fingers drumming against the mahogany surface. When Douglas saw Nicholas in the doorway, he collapsed to his knees. His entire body began to tremble like a wounded animal backed into a corner. "Please," he begged. "Please, I didn't know she was under your protection. I will leave the state. You will never see me again. Please." Nicholas's response came out cold and final, each word a sentence, "You are right. You will never see me again." He made a single phone call. 20 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled up to the estate. Men emerged, not police, but members of the Moretti family, Nicholas's oldest rivals. A deal had been struck. Territory for justice. Douglas Hale in exchange for peace that would hold for years. They dragged him away screaming into the night. His voice faded into the darkness and was never heard in Los Angeles again. Rachel Dawson tried to bargain. She offered names, senators, businessmen, politicians who had used her services. Her voice was steady even as her composure fractured like ice under pressure. Nicholas leaned close. You trafficked women. You preyed on mothers and children. Your clients are already being visited right now by federal agents who received very detailed anonymous tips about their activities. You will spend the next 40 years in federal prison. Every woman you ever hurt will testify against you. The FBI arrived at dawn. News cameras caught everything, Rachel Dawson in her cream coat, now dirty, now stained with the reality of what she was. Handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Reporters shouted questions. Her face twisted into something that looked almost inhuman, all her power and grace stripped away in the space of 12 hours. Her financial empire collapsed by noon. Assets frozen. Accounts seized. Associates scattering like roaches when the light comes on. Both villains destroyed. Nicholas stood in Rachel's empty estate as the sun rose over Los Angeles. Bruno stood beside him, silent and steady. Too many women have suffered because people like her face no consequences, Nicholas said quietly. Not anymore. Behind them, through the windows, the city was waking up. Somewhere in it, Sofia Reynolds was telling her daughters that they were safe. Somewhere in it, Emma was eating breakfast without hunger clawing at her belly. And in a cell that would be her home for the next 40 years, Rachel Dawson understood, finally, that power meant nothing when it was taken away. 1 year after that night, Sofia Reynolds stood on a balcony overlooking Los Angeles, the city stretched below her like a glittering promise. The dress she wore was tailored, cream-colored, expensive in a way that felt right on her now because she had earned it. Her hair fell in waves past her shoulders, professionally styled, and her hands, once calloused from double shifts at the diner, were steady as she held a champagne flute she barely touched. The penthouse rose above the skyline, and from here, you could see everything, the neighborhoods where people slept in their cars, the office towers where deals worth millions changed hands between breakfast and lunch, the spaces between where people like her used to disappear. Below, the charity gala continued, soft music drifting through open doors, conversations in hushed, elegant tones. Sofia had managed the event logistics for her company, a hotel chain where she now held a position as regional director. 12 months. It had taken her exactly 12 months to go from counting $78 by lamplight to this. She had enrolled in business courses while working nights, pushing through exhaustion so profound it felt like drowning in slow motion. She had paid Nicholas back every cent, $22,000 in exact deposits into an account Bruno provided, refusing to carry his debt like an anchor. Each payment was a declaration, I am not a project. I am not a rescue. I am a woman who stands on her own. She had not seen him since the night Rachel Dawson was arrested. The balcony door opened behind her. The sound was soft, almost apologetic. She did not need to turn to know who it was, his presence announced itself like a change in air pressure, like the moment before a storm breaks open. Nicholas Calabrese stepped onto the balcony wearing a charcoal suit, the fabric catching the city lights. A year had passed. His face showed it in small ways, lines deeper at the corners of his eyes, silver more pronounced at his temples. But his eyes held the same intensity, the same weight of watching everything, everyone. You have been avoiding me, Sofia said. Her voice was steady. That was new. A year ago, she would have trembled. I have been giving you space to build a life without my shadow over it, he replied. His voice was deep, careful, like a man walking through a room where the floorboards might collapse. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. I paid you back, she said. I know. Bruno confirmed every deposit. Then why are you here? Nicholas was quiet for a moment. The city hummed beneath them, distant sirens, the whisper of wind through the canyon between buildings, the sound of a million lives happening simultaneously in the darkness. Because I have thought about you every single day for the past 365 days, and I cannot pretend anymore that giving you space was about being noble. It was about being terrified. Sofia turned to face him. Of what? Of what I would do if I was near you. Of what it means that watching Douglas hurt you broke something open inside me that I had spent 15 years burying. When I saw him strike you in that restaurant, I did not see just another crime. I saw my mother, beaten by my father while I watched, small and helpless and hating myself for not being strong enough to stop it. And then I saw Emma's face, terrified, and I saw myself at 4 years old, watching the only person I loved get destroyed by a man who had convinced himself that power meant the right to hurt anyone weaker. He turned away, looking out at the city. His hands gripped the railing so hard his knuckles whitened. Sofia listened. She had learned, in this past year, that listening was its own kind of strength. I built my entire empire on fear and violence, Nicholas continued. For 15 years, I used my power to break things, to demolish people who threatened my territory, my business, my control. I convinced myself that was what strength looked like. But then you walked into my world, and you were terrified, and you stood in that restaurant with nothing but your dignity, and you refused to let a man take that from you. That is when I understood that everything I had built was empty. You are not empty, Sofia said quietly. I was. Until you reminded me what it feels like to want to build something instead of destroy it. He turned back to her. I stayed away because you deserved better than a man like me. But I cannot stay away anymore. I love you, Sofia Reynolds. Not because you were a project I could fix. Because you were already broken and you fixed yourself, and I watched that, and it made me want to be better than I was. Sofia felt something shift in her chest, a tectonic movement of hope and fear and recognition. She closed the distance between them until there was almost nothing left but the warmth between their bodies. I do not need better. I need real. And you are the most real thing that has happened to me in years. When they kissed, it felt like something breaking and healing simultaneously. The city lights blurred. The night air held its breath. For a moment, there was no empire, no violence, no past. There was only this, a woman who had learned to survive and a man who had learned to feel. Inside the gala, Bruno and Franco stood watching through the glass doors. They did not speak. In 15 years of serving Nicholas Calabrese, they had never seen him smile the way he was smiling now, not with satisfaction, not with triumph, but with something that looked almost like peace. Nicholas pulled back and rested his forehead against Sofia's. Your daughters are the most important thing in your life. I will never ask you to choose between them and me. Emma asks about you, Sofia whispered. Every week, she asks when you are coming to read her stories again. Then that is where I will be. Every night. Not because I am saving her. Because she is my family. And I choose that every single day. Sofia, you are not asking me to choose. You are choosing to be part of what we are building. That is the difference. The balcony fell silent except for the distant hum of the city below. 6 months later, Sofia walked through a building that smelled like fresh paint and new possibilities. The women's shelter had opened 2 weeks ago, funded by Nicholas's resources and managed by Sofia's expertise. 20 rooms. A childcare center with 5 trained staff members. A job training program, a legal aid clinic, a kitchen where residents could cook meals for their children. The walls were painted in soft colors, pale blue, warm cream, gentle green. Nothing institutional. Everything designed to feel like home. Emma ran ahead with 3 other children, their laughter echoing down the corridor. At 7 years old, she moved through the world with a confidence that broke Sofia's heart and healed it simultaneously. She was thriving. No more asking why Mama cried at night. No more watching the door every time the wind moved. Nicholas followed a few steps behind, observing everything with the attention he usually reserved for business strategy. But this was different. His gaze held something softer, something that looked like wonder. They stopped at a small museum wall, Sofia's idea. A collection of items from residents' lowest points, preserved in glass cases with printed stories. A child's first pair of shoes, worn through at the heel. A foreclosure notice, the bold red letters still sharp with threat. A bus ticket to nowhere, purchased by a woman with $40 and 2 children and nowhere left to go. A handwritten letter, I do not know how I will survive. But I have to try. These objects told the truth about what it meant to be invisible, to be told you were nobody, to believe it. Nicholas stopped at one particular pair of shoes. They were small, worn, held together with tape at the heel. Emma's shoes. The shoes that had walked 3 miles in the rain so her children could eat. Sofia had kept them since those days in the shelter, and now they were displayed with a placard in careful handwriting, "These shoes walked 3 miles in the rain so her children could eat." They remind us that mothers are the strongest people on earth. Nicholas read the words aloud, his voice rough with something that might have been tears. He turned to Sofia. "You did this. Not me. I just gave you time to breathe. You gave me belief that I was worth saving," Sofia said. "That changed everything. You taught me that power means something different when it is used to build instead of destroy." She took his hand, and Emma turned from the other children and ran toward them, jumping into Sofia's arms and then reaching for Nicholas, who lifted her easily. The 3 of them stood in front of those small shoes, and in that moment, the storm that had tried so hard to break them felt very far away. And if you are watching this and you have been through your own storm, if someone has made you feel like you were nobody, if you have counted dollars until your eyes burned, if you have wondered if survival was even possible, please know this: the storm will pass, and you are far stronger than you think. Help can come from unexpected places. Your worth is not defined by your lowest moment. If this story resonated with you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their life can change. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story about people who refuse to stay broken, and you will not want to miss it. Comment below, have you ever had someone believe in you when you had stopped believing in yourself? I read every single one. Thank you for being here.